This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Rerouting. Make a U-turn. Your destination behind you.
As my journey into the world of analog horror continues, a lot of folks were telling me in the comments of my Gemini home entertainment video that I should look into the original series that inspired both its style and story, so I'm going to do just that. Created in 2015 by cartoonist and filmmaker Kris Straub, Local 58 is said to be the series that coined the phrase analog horror by presenting viewers with short broadcast segments from a West Virginian public access television network that are seemingly hijacked by a mysterious threat looking to indoctrinate and take control of its viewers. At least that's partly what's going on. From the get-go, I totally see what you mean by calling Local 58 an influence on Gemini. It's impossible to ignore how it replicates Local 58's unique approach of opening each video with a traditional analog reception before a glitchy alien menace intercepts the airwaves and begins unloading vague cryptic statements and visuals that allude to something far beyond our mere infantile existence. While I personally would not call it anywhere near as frightening as Gemini, Local 58 undoubtedly deserves credit for walking so that its imitators could soar by tapping into the profound relationship between horror and nostalgia. Generally speaking, I assume most people find themselves drawn to analog horror because it brings them back to their sentimental younger years of pre-digital low-res imagery, as if watching a glowing campfire on a peaceful summer's night, which itself has a humbler charm compared to the soulless and sterile feel of certain modern media. I myself was a late 90s, early 2000s kid, so from my perspective, anything camcorder, AOL dial-up or early Sky TV related has instant access to my heart, so looking at Kris Straub's creation through the lens of its utter purity highlights what fundamentally makes the concept of lost and obscure media so inherently fascinating. While you could argue Local 58's more recent output following the success of analog horror capitalizes on the now ubiquitous lore and theory trend that continues to fuel the ecosystem for both better and worse, from what I've heard, Local 58 never originated with that intent, instead serving as a visual spin-off to Straub's popular Cove Creepypasta from 2009. Compared to later analog horrors, Local 58 doesn't arbitrarily commit to building a wider world than it does maturely focus on one single pure concept of how our numbingly hypnotic attachment to broadcast media, long before our unhealthy obsession with social media, could be used fatally against us. To put this in perspective, I want to explore how both Local 58, and by extension the original Creepypasta Cove, demonstrates how something so simple and removed from the zeitgeist of deep dive contrived lore can use our nostalgia to unlock that primal gut feeling within us when we reflect on the obscure memories of our childhood. Of course, if that sounds like your thing, make sure to leave your thoughts and recommendations in the comments below, leave a cheeky wee like and subscribe for more videos like this, and lastly, here are a few words from this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes catered to anyone wanting to learn new skills and explore their creativity, whether it be for personal or professional development or just general curiosity. I've been using Skillshare as a YouTuber over the last few years to improve in areas I feel deeply uncomfortable in, and now 5 years later, as a business owner managing all aspects of video production, scheduling and administration, I don't think I would entirely be the most competent one-man band without a lot of sound advice, tricks and techniques along the way, and even today it's still an ongoing journey I'm sure the veterans amongst us can attest to. For example, you may have noticed I changed my thumbnails in recent videos. Well, part of that was me wanting to refresh my design skills by going back to basics, and if you're someone wanting a stark reminder of the importance of nailing the simplistic fundamentals over the chaos of trying to cram too much into one image, there's a class by Ellen Lupton and Jennifer Phillips that details the philosophy of good eye-catching design. Conversely, if you've just started or thinking about running a business or freelance to elevate your career, you might might want to watch Emily Simcox's videos on bookkeeping to get a better grasp on how to efficiently organize your finances, because when I started out, I was thrown in the deep end doing all my numbers at the end of the tax year, and it was such an intense stress I never want to relive, even with an accountant. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can never be afraid to keep making mistakes, because we all have the capacity to learn and better ourselves. And so if you feel like advancing your skill journey, the first 1,000 people to use my link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. And if you do, let me know what classes you take. 2009's Candle Cove depicts a fictional internet forum called Net Nostalgia, where users reminisce over their childhood experiences watching an obscure kids show from the early 70s on Channel 58 called Candle Cove. Initially remembered as a show about imaginary pirate adventures, as the users unlock further recollections, they begin pointing out unnerving details about the show's cheap, tacky production, such as the seemingly fourth wall breaking talking ship, the lead marionette puppet being constructed from various displaced doll parts including a porcelain baby head, and the main villain being a skeleton known as the Skin Taker, who was believed to have made its clothes using the skin of children. I don't want to fully rob you of the experience. It's written with such a slow burn tension and creepy enigmatic feel that it's worth reading for yourself, but what's most striking, going into spoilers, this is your last chance, is that it ends with a user asking their mother about it, and all she remembers is the user tuning into static and watching dead air for 30 straight uninterrupted minutes each night. It's worth mentioning the Sci-Fi Channel did faithfully adapt the Creepypasta as part of the first season of their anthology series, Channel Zero, which expands on the concept over 6 episodes. I haven't watched all of it, but if you like the idea, there's no harm in checking it out for yourself. Based on how Channel Zero adapts it, in theory, the story could be said to be alluding to a subliminal supernatural signal to a more menacing danger that harbors the same skin-collecting, skin-taking qualities as its characters imply, but like with the best short horror stories, there's a haunting irrelevance to Candle Cove, where the existential malevolence is doomed to forever remain a mystery as the users simply move on to the next nostalgic trigger. Part of the effect of nostalgia is the bias and fragmentation in our memories that mean we never truly remember media in the way that we think we do. I've said this in every video where I reflect on my childhood memories like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and hell, even Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, but it's difficult to articulate that visceral reaction you get when fond memories are far more nightmarish than you remember. For example, I was thinking about Robin Williams' Jumanji the other day because my brain is random like that for some reason, and I was thinking about the scenes involving the massive plant and the spiders and the CG monkeys, and in general, just how brooding that entire film seemed to be, and I found myself more caught off guard by that realization than when I watched and possibly didn't fully understand it as a kid. It's when you're on the internet reading other people discuss these memories that you become emotionally energized by those abstract fears being validated. Candle Cove is a perfect vignette of how we culturally understand media from our childhood, especially stuff that's lost to the ether due to a lack of popular demand to have it preserved. It conveys the type of media that becomes an enigmatic time capsule that lives on exclusively through fleeting, inaccurate memories that at most might have an extremely vague Wikipedia made by the one guy who could actually be called a fan. You're all going to vividly remember Goosebumps, Courage, and Afraid of the Dark because it's forever preserved online, but that one little cult access show, maybe if you're lucky, you'll find clips in the deep dark abyss of YouTube at the quality of a 144p potato. In fact, I will give you an example I almost guarantee will trigger memories for a tiny portion of you. It's not the best example, and I'm sure many of you can share better ones, but I loosely remember watching this British-Australian show about 20 years ago called Jeopardy! It was basically the Blair Witch Project for kids, where a class of high schoolers go to Australia to document UFOs, and I think they all go missing except 2 of them who end up time traveling or something like that. Hell, the Wikipedia page says they had a public public vote to determine one of 3 endings, although I only remember the cliffhanger bad ending where the 2 kids made it back to the past to prevent the trip from ever happening, only to discover duplicates of themselves are already there. In general, I just remember it being grittier and more realistic than other live-action kids' horrors of the time, and there was even this red eye virus plot that freaked me out, but the point is, it's too obscure today to have any online clout, let's say, but a quick Reddit search will bring up a short thread where everyone describes the exact same vague memories that I had, with someone even linking the entire series buried on YouTube, hence the joys of rediscovery. Anyone out there remember Zack Files? I watched this show alongside Black Hole High or Blake Halsey High depending on where you lived. They were these 2 Canadian sci-fi shows starring Canadian Frankie Muniz, Robert Clark, and on Sky in the UK they usually aired around the same time on the Fox Kids network, which ended about 20 years ago. For some of you, hearing all this nonsense will feel like a powerful blast from the past because it's far outside popular culture. You aren't going to get that same impact with Goosebumps or Afraid of the Dark or Courage because those shows did have big followings and still have a recurring online zeitgeist. In fact, they're some of my most popular videos. There's no popular market in doing a video essay on Jeopardy, Zack Files, or Black Hole High because it's so aggressively niche, hence why I threw them in this video. I just killed several birds with one big ass stone. By the way, I know I went off on a tangent, I just got really excited talking about those shows, but to reiterate my point, when it comes to things like Candle Cove, there is a visceral feeling to our recollection becoming more vivid, surreal, frightening, and even volatile that casts a lingering doubt over whether it is truly what we remember. Contrasted against legitimate media from our childhood, Local 58 takes us a slight step further into the obscure by playing into our morbid fascination in lost media, or rather the type of contextless media you'd see on your aimless 2 AM YouTube binge watch. Local 58 has this random, isolated freak event quality to it, as if to mirror something you'd see in an iceberg video, like that bizarre blank room soup video where a crying man slurps soup while mascots comfort him, or the Hi Walter video where some psychopath has a girl locked in his closet, which led to an actual police investigation due to the real-life disappearance of Kayla Berg, but of course the video turned out to be fake, or fitting to the context of broadcast media and Local 58's style of transmissions being intercepted by something insidious, the real-world max headroom signal hijack, where on the night of November 22nd, 1987, Chicago's WGN-TV and WTTW television stations had their broadcasts taken over on separate intervals by an unidentified perpetrator wearing a cheap Max Headroom mask. I imagine Max Headroom means something to Americans because if it takes longer than a quick Google search for me to figure out who this monstrosity is, I'm just going to assume he's likely some niche MTV-esque product of his time. To be honest, I thought he looked like Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, but that could just be me channeling my excitement for their new album. There are countless hoaxes and internet mysteries I could use as examples, but I picked those ones for no other reason than they were the first instinctive associations to pop into my head, and certainly the most recurring ones I've seen used on internet mystery channels that I watch. Either way, you can see how Local 58 encapsulates the curious culture of resurrecting strange and startling videos, whether they're fact, fiction, or completely unknown. It's a series that thrives off the internet campfire boogeyman ghost story discussions we tell each other, but without deliberately going out of its way to meticulously pander to theory and lore enthusiasts for the sake of looking deep. For the purposes of continuity, I'm going to review Local 58's videos based on the order of their original release, although you don't technically need to follow that order to piece together what's happening, even if it does help guide you towards a natural conclusion in the 7 years this series has existed. That said, however, I do recommend starting with the current YouTube channel's first video, You Were on the Fastest Available Route, because it works as a terrifying cold opening that sets the tone for what's to come. Opening with weather surface, Local 58 begins by depicting an emergency alert for a meteorological event that urges viewers not to look at the sky before upgrading to a civil danger alert. The true horror emerges when the signal is then intercepted by an unknown perpetrator who tells the viewers the emergency has been lifted and directly urges them to go outside, hoping to trick those who are subconsciously and blindly obedient to whatever television tells them. You might notice a satirical undercurrent to it, much like John Carpenter's They Live, which which I pointed out also came across in Gemini Home Entertainment, but given that was inspired by Local 58, it's much more explicitly embedded in 58's identity. For context, They Live is an 80s action B-movie about Rudy Piper finding a dapper pair of sunglasses that reveal humanity has been manipulated and taken over by an authoritarian alien race who mask their true identity behind subliminal messaging and the appearance of faceless everyday civilians in a bid to uphold the status quo / equivalent political buzzword. It's basically the poster child for anti-establishment and makes a nice pairing with Falling Down, serving as an aggressively blunt, albeit very fun pre-Matrix auteur commentary on the disillusionment towards the Reagan-era Republican government during the turbulent height of the Cold War, as well as Carpenter's general cynicism towards mindless consumerism. In a simplistic sense, it tapped into Karl Marx's sentiment on the opium of the masses, which was to say that religion was an institution designed to numb us to the pain of existence so that the ruling class could continue to dominate over our lives. However, in the 180-ish years since he said that, the phrase speaks just as heavily for the escapism granted to us by media and commercial consumption and indulgence, depending on your outlook on society. Local 58 treads on some of the same themes regarding the unconditional acceptance we have to just do what we're told. It's a mentality we're raised into from birth through to school, law and order, and unwritten social rules, and thus there's an inherent obedience we feel towards authoritative constructs we're expected to simply trust. What follows is the broadcast fighting against the hacker to tell people not to look at the moon, with the hijacker even trying to prey on our sensitivity and emotions with the "we'll look together" shtick, like trying to get all buddy-buddy with your dog when it's bath time, before ending with distant mass hysteria as the sinister-looking moon approaches. Now, if you've seen Gemini, you know where this is going. The moon is essentially sentient, and the presumably alien threat is constantly trying to influence the population to look at it, as doing so causes the viewer to die, thus insinuating an overall goal of mass extermination. This will sound weird, but I really like the symbolic contrast between being glued to the glow of our television screen and gazing at the beautiful, enchanting glow of the night sky. Sentimentally living in this city where the stars are drowned out by light pollution, I love the feeling of escaping back to the countryside and lifting my head away from my phone and taking in the peaceful natural wonder at night. However, if I was to discover that natural wonder was looking to kill me, I would be burying my head back in the proverbial sand. This is what I mean when I say there's a satirical component to Local 58. There's a purge-like Black Mirror tongue-in-cheek to being blatantly told to just accept, obey, and numb our senses to this new world order, which in the case of Local 58 seems to be our impending demise. Contingency is probably the most shocking video in this regard, as it concludes the broadcast day with a cheeky presidential alert signed by Lyndon B. Johnson on behalf of the Department of Preservation of American Dignity, which, all due respect America, given your unflinchingly intense patriotism, as an outsider could almost be misconstrued as a real thing. The alert declares that the US has surrendered to insurmountable enemy forces, and urges viewers, nay demands them by martial law, to off themselves to preserve American dignity, a vague last resort designed to get under the patriotic skin of the more, feverish citizens. Like I said earlier, it's a play on blind obedience to a distressingly extreme cult-like level, with the introduction of a victory position in which the person lays down staring at the sky before committing the act, serving as a massive middle finger salute to the alien moon monster. Also, infants and pets being the smallest patriots is a line I wish I could unread, because there's something so powerful about the tone and tenacity of the language that feels all too real, and I say that as a non-American, which I think speaks greater volumes for the impact it's going for. There's even a final diabolical little cherry on top in the form of a redaction apology card, telling viewers the contingency was a hoax, but a glitch reveals that even that card was a lie and the contingency is in fact very much real. It brings up these details again when partially playing off the premise of Candle Cove via a 1930s animation called A Grave Mistake that sees a skeleton called Cadaver strolling leisurely through a graveyard like you do, while being stalked by a sentient moon in the background. It takes a jarring turn when the art style changes to realistic, when Cadaver stares into a grave to see a realistic looking corpse and eventually a bird-like fetus creature thing, just as the music cuts to eerie static. Eventually, Cadaver breaks down in fear as the moon reacts, leading to Cadaver entering his own grave and getting into the victory position as the same realistic looking moon from weather surface towers over him, soon killing Cadaver and leaving him as another realistic corpse. I don't really have much to say other than it reinforces the narrative up to this point, but given the government's contingency plan in a worst case event, I theorized that a kid show called A Grave Mistake, where the protagonist dies because it looks at the moon, serves as subtle propaganda of what not to do in the event the moon decides to bully you, playing off the moral lessons embedded into children's programming. Now, before we get to the conclusion, let's talk about fastest available route, in which dashcam footage shows a driver attempting to follow a sat-nav to their intended destination, only for it to lead them down a secluded private off-road hidden in the forest. Upon arrival, the sat-nav humorously instructs the driver to turn off their headlights, only to suddenly reveal an alien creature that chases the driver as they bail out of there, with the sat-nav then telling them to turn around before somehow revealing the destination is getting closer again, insinuating the alien was the destination, soon attacking the driver. You can see why I consider this the perfect cold opening for the series. It hints at a sinister conspiracy, introduces the darkly twisted satire, and of course we see that blind, restrictive obedience to just follow the rules, even if they're as frustratingly contrived and suspicious as your typical sat-nav. The pre-penultimate video in the current series, Real Sleep, supplements the story with some psychological lore via the Thought Research Initiative that aims to stop viewers from dreaming by activating a subconscious anti-dream program via the Kleitman map, named after the renowned physiologist and sleep researcher who served as the PhD supervisor to the founder of REM Sleep. My theory on this is simply that dreaming continues the opium of the masses sentiment by acting as a form of escapism, giving the subject unanimous freedom in their mind, which the program aims to thwart, so like in the vein of They Live, the public become mindless drones to whatever is looking to control them. Do dreams interfere with the fatal tactics used by the creatures? I mean, probably, because an empty mind can be filled with plenty of signals, not far off the tactic used in Hypnosis, as Stanford psychiatrist David Spiegal suggests. The ending of Local 58 in its current form confirms the organic-like appearance of the moon, showing it's beyond simply a planet and something to be worshipped, as the switch to digital after years of analog implies the creature's influence has now been restricted, causing them to seek other receivers. At the same time, it also confirms hope is still possible, as long as we continue to resist the urge to switch our minds off to the alluring and hypnotic glow of the inescapable screens that exist all around us. And that is Candle Cove and Local 58. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please leave recommendations on what I should cover next. And until next time, stay safe, stay away from static and the moon, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.